I wish I had enough time to cover everything, but I don't, so I'm going to pick out kind of the most important things and make sure I get to those right off the bat. So, is it going? Okay, I see the red light. I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think for a moment and tell me, how long would you estimate the typical college freshman can read material in their book or in their notes and effectively be learning what they're reading? Okay, 5 minutes, says Chris. 25 minutes? Hour? Now let me ask, anybody think more than an hour? How long? By the way, I had a guy, last time I did this, he said, oh, I can do it in about 6 hours. And I just, well, then I found out he is a medical resident, just finished medical school. His wife was in my class, and indeed, my daughter's fourth year med. Oh yeah, 4 or 5 hours, but that's not typical, I can tell you, okay? Anybody less than 5 minutes? Okay, so we got 5 to maybe 4 or 5 hours. A study was done, I believe the University of Michigan. They asked students to do the following thing. When you're ready to study, you've got all your materials, you're back in your little dorm room or your place you live, check your watch, start working. The moment you feel that sense of, I've read it, but it's not coming through, it's like, I'm wasting my time. And we all get that feeling. Note what time it is. Record that, bring it back. And they had many, many hundreds of freshmen and sophomores do this, and then somebody took the time to compile it. And typically, right about 25 to 30 minutes. By the way, it's also true of lectures. And you've all proved it to yourself. You come into a lecture, you're really alert, check the clock, and about 25 after, it's like, yeah, and I see it in every class I teach, but how long do we teach? 50 minutes. And yet, probably most of the learning, if it's going to happen, is in the first 25 to 30. Okay. I'm going to talk about a person because I also like to teach by anecdote. A woman named Jeanette. I was a junior at Western. She was a freshman. Because I was a junior, I could live off campus. Those days, colleges were your parents in absentia. She had to live in a dorm because she didn't have a relative in town. We were dating. She got her first quarter at Western, a D average, 1.0, 15 credits of D. She decided she really needed to buckle down, plus the school said, if you don't make it up, you're going to be kicked out. So the second quarter of her freshman year, she set the following goal: to study for 6 hours a night, nonstop, 6 to midnight, Sunday night through Thursday night. Friday, Saturday, she could party. The rest of the week, she was going to study. Now, one would assume, my gosh, going from little studying to 6 hours a night, 5 nights of the week, she should have aced everything. You want to guess her grade point, second quarter? 0.0. She failed every class. And this is why telling people to study more does not necessarily help. In some cases, it might actually worsen their performance. What I want to do is show you graphically what I'm talking about. Let's say this is efficient studying, and I know there are no numbers there, but higher means more efficient, lower means low or no efficiency. And this axis, we're looking at time. Here's what happens for the average student. For her, 6 o'clock in the evening, after her supper at the residency dining hall, she plopped herself down at her little study area and started studying. But here's what happened. By about 6:30, she was in a major slump. But what was her goal? To study 6 hours. So she continued to sit at her little desk and stare at pages until midnight. She was at her desk 6 hours. How long did she actually study? About 20, 30 minutes. Now, there's a simple conduct in psychology that all of you are aware of. Things that are reinforced, we tend to do more of. Things that are punished or ignored, we tend to do less of. We operate by those principles to a large degree. If you're sitting there for 6 hours, are you feeling good? No. Once you get here, you're looking at your book going, I hate geography, I hate literature, I hate psychology, all the things we're trying to get you to fall in love with, you're hating it. And so her actual good studying was followed by 5.5 hours of pain and misery. I would bet you, I don't know for a fact, that as the quarter progressed, she sat down, and finally she was done before she even started. She sat down and just stared at a book, and she flunked every class. Now, had she taken this little seminar, or figured things out on her own, she'd know what to do. First rule, the moment you start to slide, you're shoveling against the tide. What you need to do is what? Take a break. And here's what's cool about it. You can study for a half hour. It doesn't take a half-hour break to recharge your batteries. For most people, about 5 minutes. And this is where you go away, do something fun for 5 minutes. Call a friend, talk to a child, talk to a parent, a roommate. Enjoy some music. Do something you enjoy. And actually say, this is my treat for having studied for 30 minutes effectively. Go back, and here's what happens. Your efficiency is nearly 100%. Study a half hour, take a break. Study a half hour, study a half hour. Now, had she done that over a course of 6 hours, she would have got about 5.5 hours of serious studying and about a half hour of total break time. I really don't believe she would have flunked out. Now, I get students complaining, I don't have enough time to study. Look for a break at work. Look for a break at home. Those little 15, 20 minutes can be very efficient if you apply them efficiently. Unfortunately, sometimes it's really tough to get those moments, but you need to build them in somehow. You've got to have at least some time to study. It's not going to happen through osmosis. Now, I'm going to ask you a final question. Let's say you've studied till midnight. What do you want to do after your last study, 20, 30 minutes? No, not yet. You want to give yourself a big treat, okay? Whenever your studying time is done, plan something special.
So tip number 1 is to break your studying into chunked sessions. And the reason for this is that the average student can only really pay attention for about 25 to 30 minutes. And this goes across the board from lectures to reading to studying. After about 25 to 30 minutes, your efficiency starts to really taper off. And that's why the advice to simply study more is not effective at all. Instead, you want to break your study sessions into about 20 to 30 minute chunks. And after those are done, take 5-minute breaks where you do something fun or at least away from your studies. And also, once your study sessions are done for the entire day, you want to give yourself a real tangible reward for doing it. As Dr. Lobdell says in the lecture, reinforcement of positive things builds good study habits, and as an added benefit, you're training yourself to study. So as you keep doing this, you're going to be able to study for longer and longer.
Okay, next question. How many of you have a true study or library in your place of residence? Okay, two of you, if I'm seeing correctly. I've always envied that. A quiet place to actually do reading or studying, okay? I'm going to make a prediction. Many of you study in your bedroom. Okay, how many of you study in your bedroom? Well, raise high so everybody can see. That's where I studied a lot, especially when I did go to community college. If you don't study in your bedroom, I bet some of you study at the dining room table / kitchen table or bar. How many study at the dining, kitchen, bar? Okay. Now, if you don't study in those two places and you don't have a study or library, you study in the family room, rec room, living room, the place where your TV and stereo is, your couch, your easy chair. How many of you study there? Okay. Now, some of you might actually drive to a school or library. Any of you do that? Go to a, okay, a few of you do. I still remember living at home, going to Highline Community College. My folks bought me a little desk. I still have it, okay? Little desk, and I'd come home, because I did work then at Albertsons. Typically we got off at 9, get home about 10. And I'd start studying. I still remember reading Billy Budd, okay, Melville. And I'm sitting there studying, and my eyes are just, And then the bed started calling to me. Marty, come lie upon me. Now, those of you who've studied the Greek, the idea of the sirens calling sailors to the rocks, oh, it's real. I'd hear the bed call me, and I'd finally go, oh, I'll just lie down for a moment. Next thing, my mom would be yelling, Marty, you're late for your English class. And he's like, oh, God, I didn't read Billy Budd, and I'm screwed. Let me ask you, what's the primary function of a bedroom? What's the secondary function? Good. Most groups go. I go, take Psych 20 or 225, you'll learn about it. It's functional, okay? Primary function of a dining table, eating. Primary function of a living area, okay? Recreation, socializing, right? Now, a lot of students don't realize how much we're controlled by environmental cues. How many of you been to the Tacoma Mall? Funny, isn't it? Why'd you raise your hand? Have you ever been to Tacoma? You answered. Why didn't you go like this? Why? Because if I'm asking the entire class, you've been trained to do what? And you don't even think about it. How many been to Tacoma Mall? Hands go up, okay? But if I walked up to you, Chris, you ever been to Seattle? Totally stupid, right? When you're talking face to face, you respond verbally, okay? When you ask a group, hands come up. Now, here's what's bad. Now that I've tricked you, you won't raise your hand. It's like, I'm not going to raise my hand. Okay? But can you see how powerful it is? Without thinking, because we're in a classroom, how many been to Tacoma Mall? Hands shoot up. Same is true of going in your bedroom and trying to study. You're in the bedroom. Now, a piece of research done at University of Hawaii. Researchers asked the students, what's the biggest problem with studying? They said, we can't get into it. The university in question had primarily dorm rooms. Very few commuter students to the university. Most of you have seen a dorm room? Oh, okay. Most of you have seen a dorm room. They're usually rectangular if it's a duplex. One side bed, another side of bed, everything kind of mirror image. Study area, right? You've got a closet or wardrobe. So it's real interesting. In one room, you sleep, you groom, you talk with people, you socialize, you study, you snack. You're all in one room. It's a multi-purpose room. And yet you're supposed to study. If your door's open, what happens? Everybody, hey, Lobdell, what's up? And then they got to come in and talk to you. Very quickly, you can't get to studying. Well, the professors heard that the students couldn't get into studying, but they knew what the dorms looked like. In the Hawaiian dorms, all of the rooms had a gooseneck lamp. So the professor said, we're going to try a little experiment. Take that lamp, make a little sign, and put it on it, study lamp. Okay? Use it only for studying. You don't dress by it, you don't have BS sessions by it, you don't snack by it, you don't clean the room by it, nothing. You use the other lights for all other functions. Here's the way it works, and it's so easy. Every one of you can do this. Get a little lamp. You probably have one already. If you don't, my gosh, yard sale, garage sale, you can pick them up for nothing. Get that lamp, and it becomes your study lamp. So if you have to study in your bedroom, Turn your desk away from the bed. That's the like, how many have been to the mall? It makes you want to go to sleep. By the way, you can't study in the bed. It's also bad for your back if you know about posture. Turn your back to the bed, have a blank wall, have your lamp, have your books ready to go, because you can futz away a lot of time getting ready, can't you? How many of you can futz and futz? Yeah. You're ready to go, turn on the lamp, and start studying. The moment you lose your edge, 15, 20, 30 minutes later, turn the lamp off, get up, and leave the desk. What you're training yourself to study while seated there. And it becomes increasingly automatic, as did the raising of the hand. You sit, turn the lamp on, and you're ready to go. It's like magic. The students who did that were 1 grade point higher the next term compared to the control group that didn't do it. 1 grade point simply by creating a study area. Now, if you study in the kitchen dining, remove all food cues, because I know what happens there. You start thinking, turkey in the fridge. Yeah, Swiss cheese in the fridge. Oh yeah, sandwich time. How many of you have studied and created sandwiches? It takes about a half hour to make a really good one. You eat it, so damn good, what do? Make another one. And pretty soon, not only are you not studying, but you're getting the spread going, okay? You're really frustrated then. The living area, I'm going to tell you, you can do this experiment. You try to study in the living room, and you're focused, and other people are listening to music, watching a movie, watching TV. They won't leave you alone. Hey, Marty, look, it's really good. Excuse me, I'm studying. And then they get angry at you. Well, boo on you, too. You can't study in the living area. It's not designed for that unless you're all by yourself. And you turn off the TV, turn down the stereo so it's truly background. If you're singing along to your favorite song, you're not studying. You're singing along to a song. Your brain has to be focused to be really studying, not time sharing back and forth between singing and studying. So living areas, very tough to create. But if that's where you have to do it, you bring your little study lamp in, everything else off, turn on your study lamp, and create a study there. Are you getting the idea? Now, I'm going to go through a lot of suggestions. Break it up into small chunks, reinforce it. Simple to do. Create a study area. Simple to do. And you'll be amazed if you take these ideas and do them. I'm going to make a challenge to all of you. It's so easy to sit through a presentation, say, yeah, it sounds good, and then walk away and do nothing. Technically, as a psychologist, if it doesn't change your behavior, you haven't learned it. It's just in your head. To be a true learning experience, you have to behave differently. So my hope is you all make a promise. I'll try at least 1 or 2 of what I talk about today, and when you find out it works, say, gosh, I'll try a 3rd one, maybe a 4th. I went back to grad school in the mid-'80s. Second time around, I actually aced every class. PLU gives pluses. I got pluses in all but 1 class. I didn't do that first time, okay? I was a good student, but not that good. I used the principles I learned about in teaching psych to become a student. I wish somebody had told me these things when I was a student the first time. It would have been a lot easier. Okay, so we got 2 things going. Break your study up into little pieces with reinforcement. Create a study area if you don't have one.
Tip number 2 is to create a dedicated study area. And the reason for this is that our environment, the context that we're in, largely determines our behavior. So think about when you're in class. When the professor presents a question to the entire class, you instinctively raise your hand. But if he asks you specifically, you're going to give a verbal response. And this is automatic. You're conditioned to do it. Well, your studying area is the exact same. If you do it in a place where you're conditioned to do other things like sleep or play video games or hang out with friends, it's going to be really hard to get into your studying. What you want to do is find an area that is specifically used for studying, so the context of the situation makes it easy for you to get into your studies.
Okay, next thing. The more active you are in your learning, the more effective. And yet, increasingly, I have students who think studying is reading it over and over, and they're going to have some magical thing where they suddenly understand it and remember it well. When you're reading it over and over, or saying it over and over, the term for that is rote memorization, spelled R-O-T-E. It can work. It is the way most of us were taught in elementary school. The way I understand it, a lot of Asian schools depend heavily on rote. And some of you may be darn good at it. And if you can memorize and actually understand by repetition and it's effective for you, don't change. But for most of us, it's not the most efficient or effective way. The way to learn efficiently in college, first you have to decide, what am I learning? Is it a concept or a fact? A fact is the discrete little piece of information. Sigmund Freud is the father of psychoanalysis. That's a fact, okay? But understanding what psychoanalysis is a concept, okay? Understanding the name of a bone is a fact. Understanding what it does in the body gets into a concept, okay? So in studying, sometimes there are a lot of facts. In fact, I use anatomy as a good example. You got to memorize bones, muscles, organs, tissues, a lot of it. But if you simply memorize and don't understand the function of it, the comprehension of the actual concepts, it's a lot of wasted learning, really. Just to know a name of a bone is like, yes, so what, okay? What does it do? How does it function? So if it's a fact or a factoid, you have to approach it one way, and I'll talk about how you do that. But in most college classes, what we as professors are most concerned about is that you grasp the concept. Because concepts, once grasped, will stay with you a lifetime. Facts can easily get confused, but that's why we have Google, why we have reference books. If you know the concept, you can quickly look up the fact if you have to know that for a particular fact. So we'll first deal with concepts. Here's the question. Can you put the concept in your own words? If you can't, you don't really understand it. Okay? It's not meaningful to you. To make it meaningful is a struggle. It's probably the biggest struggle you have as a student. But it's a struggle you need to do, or you're wasting your study time. This is where, as a student, the more you get into the understanding, the better. Now this then raises a fun question. What is the meaning of meaning? If I say something is meaningful or meaningless, what am I really saying? Now, I'm not going to go through a big drill, which is kind of fun of teasing it out of you. But a meaningful piece is a piece that relates to something you already know. I'm not going to prove this. You all get to do a little memory task. Got to find the right. Here we go. I'm going to read to you 13 letters from our alphabet. You all know the alphabet, right? Should be meaningful. As soon as I finish, I want you to say them back to me in the same sequence that I give them to you. So I'll say them and then I'll go like that. Just say them back. Y, T, R, H, don't write them. A, U, S, P, D, P, A, Y, H. Boy, somebody sounded like they got quite a few, but did any of you get all 13? By the way, the fact that you took notes is a good thing. It's one of the best things to help you remember. And I sit in front of classes where they just go, for 50 minutes I'm giving them wisdom, and they're not taking a damn note. And then they wonder why they don't remember. You can't remember everything in a lecture. I'm going to rearrange the letters a little bit, see if you do any better. H, A, P, P, Y, T, H, U, R, S, D, A, Y. The letters in sequence. Whoosh, letters. Most of you got all 13. And you thought coming to this lecture you might gain nothing. I've just taken your short-term memory span, which is usually 5 to about 9 letters, and expanded it to 13. Can you give them again? What are they? Damn, you're good. Or I'm good. Now, obviously, it was a little easier. Those were the same 13 letters. Same ones. If you're studying anything conceptual, and you're trying to memorize it, it's like Y, T, R. It doesn't make any sense. It's in one eye, out the other. If it's out loud, one ear, out the other. But if you take the time to discover the meaning in it, suddenly it clicks. And I could probably ask you next week, what were the 13 letters? And most of you tell me. At the end of the quarter, I could ask you. Most of you could tell me.
Dr. Lobdell's third tip is to study actively, and it's best summed up with this quote straight from the lecture. The more active you are in your learning, the more effective you'll be. Now, the best way to do this, rather than going through rote memorization or reading and rereading chapters from your book, is to first ask yourself before studying, what is it that I'm learning? And what you're learning is going to fall into one of two categories, either facts or concepts. A concept is something like, what does this particular bone in the human body do? You have to understand it. And a fact is just something you need to remember, what the name of this bone is. Now, concepts are more important than facts because once you learn a concept, once you truly understand its inner workings, it's with you forever. You're going to remember it. Facts, on the other hand, can sort of drift away over time, and the good thing about that is that we have Google. We can look up facts very easily. Now, unfortunately, in a testing situation in class, you have to remember both facts and concepts, and you don't have access to Google usually, but still, concepts are going to be more important to learn first. Now, the best way to learn these concepts and to be sure you know them is to put them in your own words. Test yourself and learn actively.
How many of you magic mark, highlight, whatever you call it, your textbooks? The little yellow, pink, green, glow-in-the-dark sort of things. How many of you use the markers? Those were invented in '65, the year I started college. So I bought one. I turned entire books ugly orange. Then I figured it out. If you color a page solid orange, you've actually highlighted nothing. Yeah, by highlighting everything, you've really highlighted zip. So I did the clever thing, and you guys are way ahead of me. What do you highlight, folks? The most important thing. When do you do it? When you first read the book, right, or the chapter. So you read through, are you studying? No, I'm reading for the most important things. Zip, zip, zip. And some of you get out rulers to make it really neat, take hours to make pretty little. Then you go back to the start of the chapter. You read the first thing you underlined and you go, oh, I remember that. No, you don't. You recognize it. People are incredible at confusing recognition with recollection. Your visual recognition threshold is so great. You can see a person once, see them years later and go, I know you. Were you a student at Pierce College? Yeah. Did you take psych? Yeah. From Lobdell? Yeah. Okay. 36 years I run into that, okay? Proof of this, grab a magazine in your house that you haven't looked at for a while, leaf through it, you will get the illusion of remembering virtually every advertisement and article. But to prove that it's not recollection, it's actually recognition. Before you turn to the next page, predict what's on it. There's no way you're going to be right. But as soon as you turn, you go, oh, I remember that. No, you don't. You recognize it. Now, going back to your book, you've highlighted the most important stuff. You now go back to study it, and you say, oh, I remember it. So do you study it? No. So what don't you learn? The most important part of the chapter. And then they come in the next day all ready for the quiz. Oh, I studied hard last night, Mr. Lobdell. Here's your quiz. I don't believe it. I can't remember a thing. How many of you heard that? Those of you who teach, I could retire now if I had a buck for every one of those comments. I don't correct them. I shake my head and think, poor baby, you think you knew it. But in fact, you recognized it. You didn't know it. Now back to this active learning. How do you know it? If you can look at it, go to the next one, read it, and then stop and go back to the one before, look up in the sky and in your own words, say what that was about.
And there's one thing he gives as an example, which I think is one of the most important parts from the entire lecture, and it's his example about highlighting. Now, most students know not to highlight entire sections of the book, because if you do that, you're basically highlighting nothing at all. But if you highlight really important terms, and then you go back after your first read and highlight session and study them, and just simply recognize the thing you highlighted before and say, ooh, I know it, then you're getting into this dangerous territory where you don't know whether you're actually recalling something or simply recognizing it. Now, the human brain is very good at recognizing things. We can recognize people's faces even if we haven't seen them in a long time. But the difference between recognition and recollection is that recognition requires an initial trigger, a cue. And if you're in a test, there is no trigger or cue. You have to actually pull it forth from your memory. So to test and make sure that you're actually recalling something instead of just recognizing it, you need to quiz yourself. You need to do active studying and active learning. The fourth tip is to take more effective notes, and he's really brief on this one. Basically, he says, after class, as soon as possible, and truly as soon as possible, flesh out your notes a bit. Add some more to them so you can actually solidify the concepts in your mind. And if you're fuzzy on something, ask another classmate who also took good notes, or go to office hours or wait to the next lecture and ask the professor before he starts if he can clarify something that you don't really have a good grasp on.
I'm going to give you a couple other tips here. Taking notes, so vital. But most students who do it haven't learned a very simple rule. The first moment you get after a class, ideally right after the class, you should sit down with your notes and expand on everything you jotted down. Give it depth, flesh it out. Okay? If you even wait to go home and do it a couple hours later, you'll have forgotten some of your own notes. How many of you have done that? You've written beautiful notes, you get them home, you don't know what the hell you wrote. It's like, what is this? Okay? Well, that's a wasted note. But if you take the moment right after class to flesh it out, you now have a little more detail. Odds are at night, you can still recollect it. That will be a powerful addition with only about a 5-minute time investment per class. That is a good trade-off. Okay? Now, the next piece. Let's say you're trying to flesh out your notes. It's like, I remember they said it or he said it, but I don't know what it was about. Look for a classmate. They're usually hanging around. Go up to somebody and say, hey, what was that about? And they can tell you. Or flatter the heck out of us. Teachers want students to succeed. Sometimes it isn't perceived that way. We want you to do well. It makes us happy. And anytime a student comes up in the lunchroom, where I always try to have my lunch, and says, Marty, I didn't quite understand this. Can you give me another example? I love it. Let me jump back here to see where I am in my presentation. Okay, I was talking about being active. Activity can also take the form of recitation. How many of you know the best way to learn is to teach somebody else? But if you've got family members or roommates, teach them geography, psychology, anatomy. They often love it. One of my dearest students 2 years ago, God, I loved her. I finally met her parents. She says, I've heard so much about you. I hear every lecture you've given. She would come home, sit around the dinner table, and recapitulate what I'd talked about. It's powerful because it reinforces your learning. Plus, it tells you if you really understood it. Because if mom or dad says, well, I don't quite get that, and you go, I don't understand it either, then very quickly you have to go back and redo it. Teaching another person. Now, some of you may not have anybody at home to teach, or they're not interested. Too bad. Teach an empty chair. There's nothing wrong with talking out loud. Thinking is internal talking to a large degree. There's also non-talking thinking. Talking out loud, as long as you know you're doing it, is not abnormal.
The fifth tip is to summarize or teach what you learn, and he says the best way to actually learn something is to teach it, and the reason for this is twofold. Number one, it's a great form of active studying because you're forcing your brain to recall all the information so you can basically summarize it for somebody. And number two, you're really making sure that you fully understand the subject.
One incident in your life could change everything. I was in kindergarten and there was this noise outside the window and the teacher says, wow, there are fire trucks outside. And I remember I just lit up because I felt like they were real life superheroes. I couldn't see outside the window and all the kids started grabbing their chairs. And I grabbed my chair, I was so excited, and I bring it over to the windowsill and there's this big iron grate radiator dividing the window. I remember when I finally got to see my heroes, my face lit up. And about a split second after that, one of the other children grabbed my chair and I went face first, head first, right into the radiator. I was bleeding and I was rushed to the hospital. My mother said I was never the same after that. I had these learning difficulties, very challenged focus. My concentration was really compromised. I had a very poor memory. I couldn't retain information. I wouldn't be able to read like the other kids. And then I didn't know what was wrong with me. It actually took me an extra 3 to 4 years just to learn how to read. And I actually taught myself how to read by reading comic books late at night. And my favorite superheroes growing up actually were the X-Men because they didn't fit in. They were the mutants, they were the outcasts. And I felt growing up with these learning challenges that I didn't fit in. And I felt like I was one of those people without the superpowers. When I found out the X-Men School for the Gifted run by Professor X, Charles Xavier, actually resided right there in Westchester, New York, and that's where I lived. And so I remember every weekend when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I would ride my bicycle around my neighborhood, and I wanted to find that school because I wanted to run away. I wanted to run away to find my school, to find my superpowers, to find my super friends. And really, I remember a defining moment when I was 9 years old. I remember that a teacher was talking to another adult, thinking I wasn't paying attention, or maybe thinking that I wasn't smart enough to understand what she was saying. And she pointed right at me and said, "That is the boy with the broken brain." And I remember how hard that hit me. You know, children understand more than you think that they understand. And I remember always referring back to that moment all through school. Whenever I didn't do well, I was like, oh, it's because, I'm broken. It's because I'm different. It's because my mind doesn't work like everybody else's does. So all of high school was this. It was my struggles. I would work so much harder than everybody else. And I always thought it was unfair because my grades didn't reflect that. But I was lucky enough to get into a university. And I remember freshman year, I took all these classes ready to achieve, and I actually did worse. And things got even more difficult for me. And I was ready to quit school because I didn't have the money as it was to go to college. And I didn't want to waste that and waste time. And so when I told that to my friend was like, "Jim, before you quit school and tell your parents that you're leaving, why don't you come with me this weekend? I'm going to visit my family this weekend. Just get some time away, get some perspective." So I agreed to go there. And I remember right before dinner, his father was walking me around his property, and they're pretty well-to-do. And he asked me this very innocent question, which is the worst question that you could ask me at this time. He says, "Jim, how's school?" And it just hits me. I start crying and bawling right in front of this complete stranger. And I tell him that my whole story, how I had a brain injury and I don't learn like everybody else. And I'm the boy with the broken brain, and school is just not for me. And then he says, "Jim, stop for a minute." And he looks me right in the eyes and asks me this question. He says, "Jim, why are you in school? Why are you in school? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? What do you want to share?" And honestly, I've never thought about that before. I start to answer him, he says, "Stop." And he pulls out from his back pocket a diary, like a journal, and he tears out a few sheets and he hands them to me, and he makes me write down my answers of who I want to be, what I want to do, what I want to have, what I want to share with the world. And I don't know how much time went by, but when I was done, I start folding up the sheets of paper to put in my pocket, and he grabs them right out of my hand. And I'm freaking out because I wasn't expecting anyone to see like my dreams and my fantasies, right? My goals. And he starts reading them to himself. When he's done, I don't know how much time went by, but he looks at me, he says, "Jim, you are this close to every single thing on that list." And I'm just thinking, he spreads his fingers about a foot apart. And I'm thinking, there's no way. Give me 10 lifetimes, I'm not going to crack that list. And he takes his fingers and he puts them to the side of my head, my temple right here, meaning that between my ears is the key. It's my mind, it's my brain. And he walks me into a room of his home, and it's wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. And I start looking at the title of these books, and they're these biographies of incredible men and women throughout history, and some very early personal growth books. Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, The Magic of Thinking Big, Psycho-Cybernetics, right? Think and Grow Rich, all these books on mindset, the power of the mind. And he says, "Jim, I want you to read one of these books a week." And I'm thinking, have you not heard anything I've said? I have all these learning difficulties and all these learning problems. I have so much schoolwork to do. We have midterms. And he says, "Stop." He's like, "Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education." But I said, that's really good insight, but I really can't do it. I don't want to promise this and break my promise. And a very smart man, what he does is he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out my goals, my dreams, my bucket list, if you will. And this time he starts reading every single one of my goals, all my dreams out loud. And something about hearing like your dreams coming from a stranger's voice, incanted out into the universe, it shook my heart, it shook my spirit, my soul, something fierce. So I commit to reading one book a week with that leverage and motivation. And fast forward, now I'm at school and I have a pile of books that I have to read for school and a pile of books that I want to read that I promised to read for my life. And I can't even keep up with one of those piles. And then I saw the mug of tea, and on it had an incredible genius named Albert Einstein. And it had a quote there. It said, "The same level of thinking that's created the problem won't solve the problem." And it made me ask a new question. It made me ask this question like, what's my problem? And I came up with this answer saying, well, I'm a real slow learner. I learn very slowly. I have a very slow brain. Well, how do I think differently about it? Well, maybe I could learn how to learn faster, right? Learn how to learn. And another part of me woke up thinking there has to be a better way.